Welcome. Studies show that somewhere between 70 to 90% of manufacturing initiatives fail to achieve the anticipated levels of impact. In this webinar, we'll detail an approach that will help you realize the value you desire from these Industry 4.0 programs. Let me start with an example. One of the opportunities with smart manufacturing systems such as IoT or machine monitoring platform is that the data being collected is very valuable in many ways across all areas of the company. There are obvious uses for predictive maintenance, downtime analysis, visual controls for operators, and so forth. But that data is also valuable for controlling material movements through the plant. It can be used as the basis for an improved design for manufacturability process, and it can be used for many, many more things. But most companies don't go beyond the basics when they put these systems in place. Part of the reason why is how they implement the solution in the first place. I can hear the groaning in the audience already. So let me address this first. No, we don't need another project management methodology. This isn't meant to replace Agile or other traditional methods. It is meant as a supplement to those methods to ensure a strong focus on value delivery. In this presentation, I'll focus on how to supplement Agile sprints with a focus on value realization from smart manufacturing technologies. But I won't be talking about Scrum or any of the other basics of Agile. There are a lot of great resources out there if you're interested in that information. Here's the general flow for the value sprint process. Sprint 0 is the only one that's not focused on value. This is where the solution is initially commissioned and validated. Once that's in place, however, the real work of driving value begins in earnest. The overall smart manufacturing business case should identify many potential areas of value. In the roadmap we generate with the customer, we break those different value buckets into sprints that are hyper on generating measurable outcomes at the end of each sprint. Each sprint should focus on one specific value goal. The activities during the sprint should be structured to realize that value. More on those activities in a minute. Also, there may be additional functionality within the solution that should be implemented as part of the sprint. The sequence of the sprints is also important. There are going to be foundational solution capabilities that need to be implemented first. There will be foundational cultural issues that need to be addressed early to demonstrate the direction the organization wants to take. Additional factors to consider are the total amount of value potential for each sprint, the likelihood of success, organizational readiness for change in that area, and any dependencies that may exist, and other factors as well. Then we perform quarterly audits or health checks, and these should be used to make certain that the sprints are achieving their goals. If not, how should the sprints be adapted to improve the performance? And then iterate as necessary. So let's look at the process to create the sprints in a bit more detail. First, I'll cover the general flow for creating the individual sprints. Then I'll walk through a high-level example. So we begin with the overall roadmap and the estimated value. The roadmap should contain a list of initiatives. If these initiatives do not have individual value associated with them, do so now. And then we're going to further decompose these initiatives into a set of sprints focused around use cases that drive defined portions of that value. Once we have the list of sprints, we're going to define the sprint attributes or the outcome plan and the outcome plan for each one of the sprints. And that includes things like for execution, what process change is going to be required during that sprint, what training and cultural change, what are the technology requirements. And then other attributes about the sprint would include the time to implement it, the readiness of the organization that's going to be impacted, what dependencies exist, and potential value from that individual sprint. Then we prioritize and we sequence the sprints. So let's go back to our example of all the different uses for IoT information. The overall roadmap may have many different initiatives, but let's say that one calls for the implementation of an IoT system. There should be an estimate of the potential value to be gained from that implementation as well. If the roadmap is done at a high level, this may be the only information available when the implementation starts. But whether this next set of steps is done in the initial roadmap or as the first step in the implementation, it should be done. Working with a cross-functional team, there should be a set of brainstorming sessions to create a list of potential use cases or sprints. This list does not need to be entirely comprehensive at first. It can be adjusted as you go through your implementation, and it should be adjusted as you go through. But it should be a robust enough list to begin that some high value use cases that will make a difference to the company and create enthusiasm for the project are listed within there. Once the list is created, there can be an initial sorting based on gut feel from the team. If there are 50 distinct possibilities, not all 50 have to be evaluated at first. You can go through a voting process or other system of narrowing down to the top 5 to 10 candidates. At this point, create the initial rough implementation plan that incorporates the people, the process, and the technology. At VDI, we have detailed templates for doing this task across most of the common smart manufacturing initiatives and use cases. But there are also a common set of questions that we can recommend to look at when creating these plans. The next step is to create an estimate for the prioritization attributes of time, readiness, prerequisites, and value. And again, at VDI, we have a detailed method for arriving at these estimates, but even rough estimates that the team can reach on a consensus basis are good enough to take the next step, which is sequencing the sprints. So prioritizing the sprints is pretty straightforward. There are typically activities that have to be done in a sprint zero. This is most often doing the initial implementation or commissioning of the solution. It could involve installing hardware, running cables, getting software up and running and integrated, or other tasks. Fundamentally, the tasks that are a prerequisite to anything else being done. Once the basics have been done in that initial sprint, though, now it's time to sequence the other sprints. After this, one easy way to go about prioritization is to simply score value, time, and readiness, each on a 1 through 10 scale. Then you can take the sum, or the product if you prefer, of these numbers and use this as the initial sorting. If there are other dependencies, make sure that those are taken into account by adjusting the sort order. If there are items that are close in priority, we will often take another pass to adjust based on creating a broad base of involvement as early as possible in the project. As a final step for today, let's look at the structure of a value sprint in more detail. As mentioned earlier, the structure of the sprint needs to support the expected outcomes of the sprint. The structure can be broken down into technology, culture, and process categories, although this culture is or categorization is also flexible. For instance, we have also used a policy and leadership category with some customers. The key here is that there exists a checklist of actions to run through that touch on uh, each area. For example, there should be a strong focus on the impact on the people involved with the use case. We will often start with a SIPOC analysis to identify and document all the suppliers to, participants in, and customers of the processes being impacted. Representatives from each of those groups should be involved in the sprint. Any behavioral changes that are desired as part of the sprint should be identified and planned for. Skills gaps should be found and filled. Communication should be clear, concise, consistent, and thorough. The Processes that are going to be impacted should be analyzed to identify how steps can be simplified, automated, eliminated, or augmented. Any impacts on standard work should be thought through and well documented. Also, think through how to change any associated meeting structures to utilize new capabilities. How can decision making processes be made more data driven? It's also important to establish a baseline of performance before starting the sprint. These are just ideas for the people and the process impact, but it starts to give you an idea. We have a very thorough list for what we should look at within each sprint. And then the list of technology requirements for each sprint depends heavily on what is being implemented. But some considerations are listed here: security, data cleansing, contextualization of information, user workflows, integration with other systems, and more. Finally, it's important that the outcome plan has well-defined KPI that define what success is going to look like. There should be agreement on how any functional KPI being measured will translate into the bottom line impact for the business. There should also be a target of having a measurable impact from each sprint as its whole purpose of being executed in the first place. So that was a very quick run through of how to utilize value sprints to maximize value realization from smart manufacturing. If you would like more detail on the program or to discuss it with me directly, please follow up through any of the methods on the screen. The QR code will take you to the Visual Decisions website for more information. Thank you very much.